Don't argue with me. Argue with Tim Apple. Clap it. Hey. Chop rice. Chop rice. Chop rice. No need. Chop rice. There's no need. Yeah. Buying a new iPhone today isn't very much to that. The iPhone 16 was sold off the idea that it will have Apple Intelligence, AI. It doesn't have that. So it's just an iPhone 15 with an extra button, or an iPhone 15 or iPhone 12 Pro Max without that extra button. Maybe a better camera, but if you're serious about photography, you own a professional camera. But this has been an ongoing story that's been going on in the background of a lot of the tech industry, as you know, Africa constantly being a country being pillaged and plundered for its resources, but the people never gaining any of that, not even a molecule of what is produced, and the devastating trend of damage and pain and suffering that will go on for millennia within the bloodlines and the people there. So we want to kind of discuss and talk about that, but it's neither here or there. Like, don't feel good about like, oh, Apple's finally committing to stopping this. Oh, Apple's stopping because they're being forced to. We know our companies do not believe in mercy, but let's figure out why they're stopping and what's the consequences if they don't. Apple says it has told suppliers to stop buying minerals from Congo. Apple on Tuesday said it strongly disputes allegations that it uses conflicts minerals in production of told suppliers earlier the year to stop purchasing those minerals from Democratic Republic of Congo and Rwanda. Yeah, you could tell them to stop purchasing it from there, but then someone else will just purchase it and then give it to them, and therefore it's not being purchased. This is something that this is why the diamond industry is so like corrupt and so many other things like this. And like, I was telling this to my friend the other day, like me being from Africa would almost be crazy for me to buy a real diamond, because I know how that diamond was produced. I know how that diamond got here. Like, why would I take part in punishing like my friends, my own type of people? And people would be like, oh, well, the shirts and clothes. I'm like, yeah, there's certain things you can avoid. And if there's certain things you can avoid, then we will make a sacrifice for it. But a $20,000 lab diamond and a $20,000 real diamond, if the science can't tell them apart, I don't think the naked eye will be able to either. And if somebody prove me wrong, I don't know. I haven't had a reason to go ring shopping. In a statement to Reuters, Apple said it told its suppliers their smelters and refiners must stop buying tin, tantalum, tungsten, and gold from two countries as conflicts in the region has escalated. Apple's statement came in response to a criminal complaint filed earlier in the day against the company in France and Belgium, where Congolese government alleged Apple uses conflict mineral laundered through international supply chains. And that's a major statement. And once again, the EU is like probably, when we think about how this world is going to be shaped in the next few months, it's heavily going to be based on how the EU responds to these minerals. The stock market hasn't suffered for it, not one bit. Apple's down right now, but the stock market understands, like, it's been on a rally for the last few days. I think if 3 days with 4 stocks, you could have easily made $100,000. There's people walking around with 4,000% AVGO and stuff like that, but this doesn't go without saying that this conflict will affect the stock market. But it's also something to be said where it's like, it's not like Apple's innovating or doing anything spectacular that would even warrant this type of behavior. Imagine coming out with a phone that doesn't have all the features on it and you charge full price. What are you, a video game company? Boom, that's a joke. Who do you think you are, Ubisoft? Promising us games that aren't made yet? Like the iPhone 16 is nothing even special about it. There's nothing special about it. In Paris, the Democratic Republic of Congo has filed a criminal complaint against Apple. Subsidiaries in France and Belgium accuse the tech firm of using conflict minerals in the supply chain, lawyers of the Congolese government told Reuters. Apple strongly disputes the allegations and says it's told its suppliers they must not use the minerals in question sourced from Congo or Rwanda. But this doesn't solve the problem, because those people aren't risking their lives because so I can have a new iPhone. They're risking their lives so they can eat, so they can live, survive. So cutting off the revenue doesn't stop the treachery and the dilapidated situation that they're in. It just puts a band-aid over it that you won't be poisoned by cobalt poisoning in the near future. Congo is a major source of tin, tantalum, and tungsten, so-called 3T minerals used in computers and mobile phones, but some artisanal mines are run by armed groups involved in massacres of civilians, mass rapes, looting, and other crimes, according to the UN experts and human rights groups, which is always going to be a major concern, a major issue, and major topic of concern about how these things are sourced and how these things are grabbed. And Apple, for what it's worth, saying that they're not part of it, but you have to be able to prove that. You have to be able to prove that, and I'm very curious to know what their stock prices are, because this came out today. AAPL, Apple stock. Not financial advice, but we want to know. Yeah, they're up 0.97% on the day, even with this news coming out. And their top stories on themselves, none of them are mentioning this. It tells the tape. It tells the tape and the story of things that to come, right? And even after hours, they're still trading at a significantly higher rate. They're sitting currently at 8 p.m. They were sitting at just under 18 cents of their closing price. All right. France and Belgium were chosen because of their perceived strong emphasis on corporate accountability. Judicial authorities in both nations will decide whether to investigate the complaints further and bring criminal charges. In an unrelated case, in March this year, the U.S. federal court rejected an attempt by private plaintiffs to hold Apple, Google, Tesla, Dell, and Microsoft accountable for their plaintiffs described as their dependence on child labor in the Congolese cobalt mines. So we know America's cooked. Like America's not going to allow anybody to come touch their companies on American soil. But the fortunate part, for accountability's sakes, is the EU has stood above, rank and file above all other groups, right? They're not going to allow, for what it's worth, the EU exploitation of companies or exploitation of natural resources of lesser people in the sense of their socioeconomic standards by companies. Companies' fortunes will not outdo the life support of people's health. But along with the regulations and bringing down the accountability, there's little to no talk about how we can assist these people so they don't fall into these tropes. And there is mass famine and a hope and civil war and civil unrest going on in those countries. And it does sound kind of gross to say, let's send people there to help the citizens get on their feet. And it's just like, isn't that how we got here in the first place? Colonialism. So like I see that angle. I'm aware of it. Mineral fuel violence. Since the 1990s, the Congo's mining heartland in the east have been devastated by waves of fighting between armed groups, some backed by neighboring Rwanda and Congolese military. Millions of civilians have died and have been displaced. Apple mentioned ITSCI 5 times in the 2023 filing of the conflict minerals. The filing also made multiple mentions of RMI, in which Apple said it had continued active participation and leadership, but did not mention that RMI ditching the ITSCI. In July, the statement, the U.S. State Department said flaws in the traceability schemes have not garnered sufficient engagement and attention to lead to changes needed. So basically, they're saying the cursory look that we've done over Apple's practices and these other companies' practices with these minerals hasn't risen to the scale of they're doing something wrong. You know, Apple can't be held responsible for hiring somebody that hires somebody that hires somebody that hires somebody that uses child laborers. Apple can't be in charge of that. Apple didn't hire them. And a lot of companies get through that. And you see parts of this in America as well, right? The last big company I worked for, I was a worker who, and this became an issue because I worked for a big company. But when you look at my pay stub, that big company just hired a hiring company, a HR company, to manage me. So my paychecks came from that hiring company. And I never got a check to necessarily say I worked for this company. And when I did a background check, it showed a discrepancy like, well, you never worked there. And I was like, well, technically I never did work there, but this is something companies do here in America. So it's not surprising to see that they use this as a phallus like in other countries. Like companies in America will exploit poor countries to maximize profits. It's something that we accustomed to, but it's not enough just for us to point it out. It's not enough for this. Hopefully that Belgium and France legal departments can maneuver and make sure, not even holding them accountable, just holding them accountable is necessary, but doing something along the lines of supporting the people on the ground who have to rely on the horrible treatment these companies are freely giving to them, right? Freely being able to do because they don't have anyone to hold them accountable. And when you don't have anyone to hold your feet to the fire, you look like you can walk on water. And that's just not something we need Apple to think they can do. Clap it. Get their ass. I fully support France and Belgium. Get their ass. We don't need an iPhone 17, loser. Like, share, and subscribe.